All right, welcome back to Fight Talk, where we talk combat sports. My name is Austin Ullman, and we're going to talk a little UFC Mount Rushmore. Maybe more importantly, MMA Mount Rushmore, but it's really going to be the UFC. In honor of Alex Pereira Fight Week. So here we are. He fought at MSG, turns around 300, 303, now 307. And so certainly entering some of these talks about the most active champion of all time. But not only is he incredibly active right now as a champion, he's entering some other discussions, and we're going to dive into those a little bit. And I'm excited to do that because we're really entering an interesting period with him. It felt like him and Sean O'Malley were the two stars in this sport, and obviously Sean O'Malley just lost, and Alex Pereira looks like he might never lose. So we're going to dive into that, and we're going to look at the UFC Mount Rushmore. Who are the top 4 UFC fighters of all time? Is Alex Pereira one of those right now? If he's not, will he be soon? And could we be talking about Alex Pereira as the GOAT, which, by the way, I mean, it's an incredible conversation considering the fact that he entered the UFC not that long ago at a pretty old age for MMA, and now here he is in some fascinating conversations. So it was after UFC 303 where he knocked out Yuri Prochazka the second time. Me and Jackson did a podcast in my basement, and we talked about it, and we said, okay, so there's some conversations that need to be had now, or at least need to happen soon. And those conversations took place that night, and I went to a place where I said, you know what, I think he'll be the GOAT. I think we'll call him the greatest of all time at some point. And he's at this very interesting point here within the next couple years, in the fact that he might be fighting the guy who Dana is telling everybody is the GOAT, and that is Jon Jones. Certainly not a guarantee that fight's going to happen. Not a guarantee that Jon Jones is going to fight at all after UFC 309. But there's a chance. And as long as there's a chance, we're going to talk about it on this podcast because that's what we do. So here's the top 10. This is an ESPN article from 75 days ago, so earlier this summer, ranking the top 10 MMA fighters of the 21st century. July 22, this was released. So number 1, they had Jon Jones. Okay, so we're going to go into that, and I believe we have Jon Bones Jones right here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to look at these guys' records, what they've done, and at the end I'll get my Mount Rushmore and give some more bold predictions on Alex Pereira and where he is right now and where he will end up. So here's Jon Jones. Took the loss at the Ultimate Fighter heavyweight finale right there. Had the no contest with DC right there. And otherwise, it was all wins. So obviously beat Victor Belfort right here. Chael Sonnen, Gustafsson, Glover Teixeira, DC. The no contest with DC. Beat Gustafsson again. And then Dominic Reyes, and then obviously the most recent one against Ciryl Gane. Now, this has been a dominant career, without a doubt, from Jon Jones. There's been some ups and downs, and most of the downs have taken place outside of the octagon. But what I'll say Jon Jones, and I want to keep it short for a lot of these, but what I'll say about Jon Jones is this. He can wrestle and he can strike. And so the question when we're talking Mount Rushmore is that important? Are we looking for a guy who can do both, right? Or is it okay that Alex Pereira is really only a striker? Because if we are looking for a guy that can do both, I think Jon Jones is your GOAT. And I'm not opposed. With Dana, the pound for pound thing frustrates me. I think Islam's number 1 pound for pound. It's either Islam or Alex Pereira right now. I don't think it can be Jon Jones. But the GOAT thing, I completely understand it. And I think it's a fine take. And So I think Jon Jones, without a doubt, on the Mount Rushmore, and potentially the GOAT. There's some interesting arguments there. Next up, we have GSP, obviously. Now, GSP, before my time as a UFC fan, never watched a GSP fight live, but obviously the record speaks for itself, 26-2. His last fight was against Michael Bisping, in which he won, beat Nick Diaz, Dan Hardy, BJ Penn, Matt Hughes, BJ Penn before that. So obviously, certainly not the names. I mean, listen, when you go down to a 2024 UFC fan, GSP and Jon Jones, just the guys they've beat. I mean, Jon Jones is going to be a little better, but overall, nothing crazy. Obviously, the last fight for GSP was in 2017. Before that, it was 2013. So we're talking about a guy who, it's been a little while. And so it's really hard because, eras in sports are hard of like, how do you compare Bill Russell to LeBron and Magic to Jerry West, and all these different situations. With the UFC, it's tough, and you could say, how's that the case? I mean, it's only been here for 30 years, right? But it is tough because the game has already changed so much, and because we're so modern right now and things are changing all the time, and the sport's still fairly new, we're learning a lot of new things very often. So it's really hard. GSP, again, without a doubt, Mount Rushmore. Many people put him at number one. I think the argument for number one is Jon Jones or GSP right now. We're not going to sit here and argue that now because, frankly, I didn't watch enough of either of them in their primes to know. And it's not really an argument that needs to be had. I mean, you can just be happy for what they both did. Anderson Silva's in there. Obviously 34-11 and a lot of losses at the end of the career there, but quite the career it was. Now, obviously, there's some arguments about, well, is he even the GOAT at 185? Listen, personally, I have him in the Mount Rushmore. I don't think he'll be there for long. I think we're going to have, I don't know who it is. I mean, I think Pereira takes a spot. But it'll be soon that guys are taking his spot. A fantastic career, but a guy who was not able, like the fact that he couldn't beat Adesanya is a big deal. Just because Adesanya is a newer name. And so people look back at this, they'll say, well, who did he beat? And it's hard because for a new UFC fan, he didn't really beat anyone. But that's Anderson Silva for you. I think now he's in the Mount Rushmore, but I think he's out soon. And by soon, I mean probably within the next 5 years. I think we've got a guy who is just more consistent and has a better record. And, yeah. And I don't think that's really argued by anyone. Demetrius Johnson. So DJ obviously just retired. His last loss was to Henry Cejudo. That was back in 2018. And the record for him is 27-3-1. Fantastic career. And he's another one where, I think, is he in some people's right now? Sure. Will he be gone soon? Likely. Obviously, fighting where he did at 125, just didn't get the opportunity to, face the guys that he needed to. But obviously beat Henry Cejudo the first time. And a fantastic career from him. No one's doubting that. Khabib Nurmagomedov is the last guy we're going to look at before Pereira here. And Khabib, obviously, perfect 29-0 MMA record. And this is where you're going to get more of the newer fans saying, oh, okay, he beat McGregor, he beat Poirier, he beat Gaethje. And then, obviously, there's plenty of critiques with this. that he wasn't taking fights and that he didn't have that many title defenses and that he retired early and all of those things. But nonetheless, a fantastic, looked perfect, couldn't do better. And honestly, I think Khabib is in my Mount Rushmore. And I think his legacy, his impact on this sport is what'll put him there. And not just because of what he's done, but we're going to see traces of this guy for a long, long time in the sport. I'm talking about Umar Nurmagomedov. I'm talking about the fact that, hey, Bilal just fought his best fight against Leon. Guess who was in Bilal's camp helping him? This guy. It's incredible when you look at first what his dad did for him and now what he's doing for the sport. We're going to see this guy's impact for a long time. That's not going to change anytime soon. And so I think that puts him on the Mount Rushmore. I really do. And I think a perfect record in MMA, I think that's something we're going to look back at and say, that's incredible. The guy never lost in MMA. Will we see that ever again? I don't know. It is just so tough to become a champion and then win as champion. And I'll never get mad at a guy for retiring early when it comes to when you cite it for health. I have no issue with that. I have a lot of respect for this guy, truly. And so that's Khabib Nurmagomedov. So personally, you've got to pick 4 of these, right? And so I'm going to pick Jon Jones, GSP, Khabib Nurmagomedov, and then choosing between Silva or DJ is tough, but I am going to choose Silva just because, listen, record holder for most consecutive wins, better names on the resume, which, by the way, isn't DJ's fault, but you'd have to look at it, and just a little bit of style that he brought into the UFC that we're going to see for a long time, and so I enjoy that. So I'm going to put those 4. But I think now we look at Pereira and ask, where does Pereira fit in this? Obviously, Pereira fights tomorrow night against Khalil Roundtree, and so what has Pereira done? Okay, he beat Sean Strickland when he came into the UFC. He beat Israel Adesanya, become the champ in 22. Then he lost to Israel Adesanya in that knockout last April, and then moves up to 205, beats Jan Blachowicz, beats Yuri Prochazka at MSG, beats Jamal Hill on UFC 300, which, by the way, it's just crazy that he headlined 300 there. Beats Prochazka International Fight Week, and now Khalil Roundtree. You can go ahead and add Ankalaev, another win by Roundtree, a win by Ankalaev. I believe it. I think he'd beat Israel Adesanya easily if that fight even happens anymore. Who knows if it will? Probably not. And so then it gets interesting, and we'll talk about this in a second with Aspinall and Jones. But I personally think that he has done enough in the UFC because of how active he's been and how dominant he's been, how absolutely untouchable this guy has been. I think he has done enough to knock out Anderson Silva. And so my current UFC Mount Rushmore is Jon Jones, George St. Pierre, Khabib Nurmagomedov, and Alex Pereira. I'm knocking out Silva and DJ. I will put Jon Jones at 1, GSP at 2, Khabib at 3, and then Alex Pereira at 4. He's incredible. He's invincible is the word I think that needs to be used. He's untouchable. It's just fantastic what this guy has been doing. And so then we get into the conversation that goes like this. Okay, if this continues, he goes up to heavyweight. He either fights Tom Aspinall or Jon Jones. I think he should fight someone else first, like a Volkov or something like that, just to get into it a little bit. But then it's a Tom Aspinall situation or a Jon Jones situation. If he goes and beats Jon Jones, I understand it's an older Jon Jones, but it'd be hard to put Jon Jones. I have Jon Jones at 1. It'd be hard to put Jon Jones ahead of Pereira if Pereira beats him. If that fight doesn't happen, and Aspinall keeps doing what he's doing, and he were to beat Aspinall, I think he's the GOAT. So I think if he beats Jon Jones, he's the GOAT, and I think if he beats Tom Aspinall, he's the GOAT. If that fight never happens, and he continues to dominate at 205, I think it would be hard to put him as the GOAT, just because he was late into the UFC, and these guys that did it for their whole lives, GSP and Jon Jones. So I think for that reason, and I just think for the reason that when we do look back, the Adesanya win will be good, But when we look back, I mean, he's kind of what's like Prochazka, I love him, Jamal Hill, I love him, but Pereira's was making these fights big. And so I think when we look back, if all he does is ever fight at 205 now, we're going to say Jamal Hill wasn't that good, Prochazka wasn't that good, Khalil Roundtree wasn't that good, Ankalaev wasn't that good. And maybe they were, but I'm just saying that's what people will say. And so it's important to understand. But I think if he beats Aspinall, because look what Aspinall's doing right now. I mean, he's a 1-minute finisher too, just like Pereira is. He's getting 1-minute finish after 1-minute finish. That's what Aspinall's doing. So I think if he beats John Jones, you can't put John Jones above him, and have John Jones at 1, which would move John Jones to 2 and Pereira to 1. Or I think if he beats Tom Aspinall, because I think it'll be the general consensus that if Aspinall and Jones don't fight, so let's say Jones retires and then he beats Aspinall, I think it'll be the general consensus that Aspinall is still better than Jones at this point in their careers. Right now, I think Aspinall's better than Jones. I think he's literally better on the ground and striking. This guy's invincible right now. And so I think if Pereira beats Aspinall or Jones, I think he's the GOAT, without a doubt. I'll call him that. If he doesn't do it, I think it'd be tough to call him the GOAT. But I'm putting him currently on my Mount Rushmore. So with that, this guy's incredible, and I can't wait to watch him tomorrow night to add to this resume that he's doing. So just to conclude, John Jones 1, GSP 2, Khabib Nurmagomedov 3, and Alex Pereira 4. If he keeps doing what he's doing and never goes up to heavyweight, I think he'll be Mount Rushmore 2 or 3 maybe. But if he goes up and beats either Aspinall or Jones, I think Alex Pereira is the greatest UFC fighter of all time. And I personally think he will do it. I'm just such a believer in what's going on here. I think he will do it. And so I've said it. I think within the next year and a half, 2 years, we're going to be calling this guy the greatest UFC fighter of all time, which is just insane. And he couldn't be doing it without all the activity. Because, like I said, he came in late. If he wasn't being so active, we would never even be having this conversation. But here he is, fighting at 300, 303, 307, and he's going to fight 3 times this year and probably get 3 highlight knockouts. I mean, he's already got Fight of the Year locked. All he has to do is beat Roundtree. However, even if it's a 5-round boring decision, he's got Fight of the Year locked. So this guy's incredible, and it's guys like this that make it fun and show that, hey, you don't have to have a crazy personality or do all these crazy things. Just be active and be exciting in the ring, and people are going to love you. So Alex Pereira, these talks will continue. We will be wrapping up and talking about his fight tomorrow night, hopefully, after the fight. I cannot wait for that. But for now, I am Austin Ullman. This has been the Fight Talk YouTube channel, and that was my UFC Mount Rushmore. And I believe Alex Pereira will be the GOAT in no time.